and welcome to this episode of Health WISE-360, a creation of Clarissa Burt, founder of In the Limelight Media. And I'm your show host, Chrissy Cordingley, and you'll be able to see this interview on In the Limelight TV, which is distributed on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and 100 other smart TV apps. The audio version of this interview can be heard wherever you listen to your podcasts. And today I'm really excited to be interviewing Halima Yates, who is the CEO and founder of Luv Mrk, where she provides mindset coaching, guiding people to value themselves and others. Halima started Luv Mrk in 2017, but she has over 20 years of experience collaborating with organizations and or leading her own programs for self-empowerment and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Due to her own experience of having an unhealthy sense of worth, engaging in self-sabotaging behavior, and even experiencing suicidal ideation, she's used that experience along with training and research to design her own curriculum that guides people to build and maintain healthy thoughts and habits that positively impact their life and their community. And she's also the author of the book, Dissolving the Anchor, Untethering Dysphoria and Self-Doubt to Create an Empowered Life. So excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us, Halima.
Thank you, Chrissy. I'm honored to be here.
We're honored to have you. This is so exciting. So you have quite the story. So why don't we just start with that? What is your story that sort of led you on this path to mindset coaching?
Yeah, so growing up, as you shared in the introduction, I grew up with having a negative self-identity and self-image. I had a low self-esteem and unhealthy sense of worth. I dealt with self-sabotaging behavior. I engaged in self-harm, and yeah, I dealt with suicidal ideation as well. But there are a lot of factors that happened that came to play that is why I felt the way that I did about myself, and why I felt like living my life was the way to go. So just to give a little bit of a background about myself is growing up, when my mom divorced my dad, we moved in with her parents. And in that house, there was like 11 of us and sometimes more. And it was family members and also friends of family that would just be coming and going. So in this house is where I started to develop like feeling unsafe, because I dealt with domestic violence there. I also witnessed substance use and addiction. I also felt alone because my cousins and sisters, I was the youngest, and so they all hung out with each other, so I was excluded. And so yeah, it just wasn't like the best experience. There were some good times there, but some bad times. So that's where I started to develop, feelings of fear and then like unwanted and unloved, things like that. And my mom was hardly around because she had to work all the time. And then when she remarried, we moved into a community where there wasn't a lot of ethnic or racial diversity. And so I dealt with racism there. And then in the home, as well as, at school or in the media, I wasn't really learning anything to help me or instill in me to have any confidence in my appearance or my identity, my abilities, or just my, who I am in the world. And so just dealing with all that, plus financial hardships and other life challenges, it was bringing me down, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have the tools. And so I started drinking and getting high in order to like escape the pain that I was feeling, in order to numb myself. And I got to a point where that wasn't enough. And so at the age of 16, I attempted suicide because I really honestly believed no one would care if I was around. I wasn't doing anything to make life a better place. And just, there was no reason for me to be here. I was in too much pain. And so in order to end the pain that I had, I thought I had to end my life. And so after I survived that suicide attempt, it took years before I was able to actually make the sustainable change that I've made now in my life. I had to really understand like why I felt I was unlovable, why I had this self-defeating approach to life, why I didn't love myself. I had to understand all of that, and I had to get to a point of how can I live? How can I manage what I can't change? How can I change what I can, have the strength or the courage or the ability to know what I have to change what I can't accept. And then also just, love myself and just change my mindset to realize my worth and what I can do to stop reacting to life and start, making intentional choices to create the kind of life that I want to live. And because of all of that, my experience and my research and my training, I want to use these tools to guide others that are dealing with the same struggles that I dealt with, to help them realize what they have within them to change their life, and then also determine what will work for them.
You have pretty much the hero's journey, right? That mindset of taking what has happened to you and turning it into something so beautiful and helpful for everybody else. And I love your vulnerability. It's amazing. So could I ask, and I know I didn't have this question prepared, but I would just love to know. So after your suicide attempt, and as you started the journey to get to a place where you could be self-aware enough and make space for yourself, was there another person or a certain circumstance or environment that really helped you find those tools? Like, where did you start? How did you get from the hospital to learning about where to start with some of these tools?
Having such a good question. So I actually didn't have access to therapy. I did try it, and the first day, because after attending suicide, I had to go see a therapist, and so I did see that gentleman that first time, and then when I went back for the second appointment, he forgot that he had an appointment with me, and that was like the last thing I needed because I felt I didn't matter already.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna have to save myself. And then my grandmother, she was like, okay, well, let's try another approach. And so she like worked at a metaphysical store, and so she had me meet with a spiritual leader, and that yeah, and that person, they shared with me that once you have a purpose, then that gives you a reason to live. And so I started on that journey of trying to figure out what my purpose was. But just along the way, I just met some amazing people who gave me some great advice. And sometimes it was tough love, but it was just, through different experiences and meeting people along the way where I was able to realize what I could do to change my life or to feel better, or what I could do to feel better, just work on my emotions, work on how I felt about myself. And, like I said earlier, the research, the cognitive behavior techniques, those have helped me so much. So it's all of that combined that helped me.
You basically developed that openness and that curiosity that's required, right? And it's that being able to be okay with uncertainty and then look at what surrounded you, right? It's like the right players, the right environment came into your scope when you needed it, when you were ready for it. And I think that's really amazing. Really, really amazing. So now let's get to your practice a little bit. So what are the programs and tools you offer that really help others go through that positive self-transformation? Because healing is messy. Healing is, I mean, it's lovely. We love to think, we have angel wings and we just kind of fly off, but it's messy and it's hard work, right? It's not easy sometimes to put to rest
Oh,
this
no, are you
stuff.
there?
So yes. Can you still hear me? So how do you help participants go through that positive self-transformation?
Yeah, and you're so right about like healing being messy. I didn't understand that at first, because when I was on my journey, I was, reading self-help books like a little bit here and there when I would hear about them. And I'm like, or when people would talk to me, that's when I started understanding toxic positivity, because I'm like, how is it that, just suck it up, or just like you can do it, or you're like, be strong, for like whatever. It made me feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Because I do go through self-doubt every now and then, and I'm not always like 100% happy, and so I yeah, that was interesting to me, like with this journey. So I'm thankful that you said like it can be messy. It's not always like, oh, I know what to do and now I'm cured and now I'm I'm gonna be great forever.
That would be amazing, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So I work with people on basically building awareness to what has developed their mindset to begin with. Where did you learn? What are the external factors that taught you that you don't matter, or that taught you that you're not good enough? And I do realize that we have our internal factors like our brain chemistry, our genetic inheritance, and just our personality that shapes ourselves, like why we see things the way we do, or react to situations, and all of that. But I work on the external factors. So we look at education, religion, politics, the media, our environment, experiences, our peers, different factors that shape who we are. So we look at that, like where did you learn the certain feelings that you have about yourself? Any of these negative thoughts, where did you learn it? So we pinpoint that, because once you understand that, then you're able to realize what areas you need to resolve, what experiences you need to emotionally heal from, what toxic messaging that taught you to devalue yourself do you need to unaccept as truth. So we work on doing that so we can defeat the inner critic and embrace the inner advocate, or just build a positive self-identity and self-image, and a healthy self-esteem and sense of worth.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned toxic positivity, because I remember sort of when I started the journey as well with the healing and the mindset, and already feeling like a failure or like worthless, and then being like,
Yeah.
but I'm still having these negative thoughts. Man, I'm even a failure at being positive. This, you know what I mean? Like it's just not like, we're human. Of course we have
Yeah.
emotions. We need to just stop labeling them good or bad and just examine what they are. So I love that you shared that. Thank you. So share a little more about your book and tell us a little bit about what that's about. What does the title mean? And how does your story and advice that you offer help the reader, again, as well, to continue making those changes in their lives?
Yeah, so the title of the book is Dissolving the Anchor, and I call it that because I look at the anchor as anything that's holding you back from being your true self, from being able to be happy, being able to live the kind of life that you want to live. If anything is holding you back from being able to do that, then that's your anchor. So I call it Dissolving the Anchor because I want to be able to provide any tools that help you to dissolve that, so you can be able to set yourself free, to know that you matter, to love yourself, and to be able to make choices that you want to make in life that will build the kind of life that you want to live. And so I share my journey. It's really a raw and real depiction of the mind that I had when I was young up into adulthood. And so I use the narration of my story. I also share poetry, and I commission art from artists worldwide in order to just really give the image and have you go into that place of what it was like to you just feel like you don't matter, and then just to go through that journey in order to get to a place where you can start to love yourself and realize that things aren't always going to be perfect, and you're going to go through trials and tribulations, and to allow yourself to feel those emotions. Because that's another thing about toxic positivity that I have an issue with. It's like, just suck it up. It's like, no, you got to feel those emotions. Because if you suppress it, or just like, put it deep down, it's going to boil at some point, it's going to boil out.
It's coming.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
It's coming. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely I feel like I provide practical advice. As well as my story, I provide practical advice on how to like manage and overcome adversity, and just be able to constructively look at yourself when you look in the mirror, and not compare yourself to other people, and just building a healthy mindset overall. So yeah, that's what the book is pretty much about.
I really love that. And I think it's really great too, when a practitioner or a healer like you, or a transformation coach, also, shares their story so openly, but also is very clear, like, just the way I did it doesn't mean it's going to be the way you do it, right? Like, you have that individual, like, you're really looking, and when you talked about that person's individual circumstances, so you're really honing in on helping them discover what is the best way for them to transform and heal, right?
Yeah, we don't all have the same path. I mean, we may have similar experiences. There may be certain advice that can be useful to you, but it's more of like, what tools are going to be best for you? What's going to benefit you the most? And so it's not about, I'm going to teach you to do it my way, and you have to do it my way. I'm just going to do what I can to help build that awareness for you to be aware of what's disrupting your happiness, or what's making you believe that you don't, matter, or that you're not enough. Like, I just do what I can to help build that awareness, so then they can be able to consciously notice things, and then determine what to do moving forward, to not allow that to overpower their life to a place where it's not going to be, beneficial to them.
Absolutely. You're just helping them see the possibilities. It's amazing. So going back to suicidal ideation, and we do have a suicide crisis all over the world, but in North America, I live in Canada, in my province, there's a high rate of suicide, especially in marginalized communities, and it's a real sadness. It's real tragic. And so if you know someone who's experiencing suicidal ideation, what approach can you take with them? How can you recognize or help? Or even if yourself are starting to feel that I'm not safe with myself, what are some approaches people can take?
Yeah, so if you know anybody who is feeling like they don't see a point to be here anymore, if they're having those thoughts, then listen to them, try and understand them, do your best to not judge them, not criticize them. Don't dare them to prove that they don't want to be here anymore. Like, well, if you don't want to be here, then do something about it. Like, just don't dare them to do that. Just listen to them, offer empathy and compassion. If they are saying things like, if things are going to be better when I'm gone, or just pay attention to the word that they're saying to know if like they're in immediate danger, so you can make sure that they're not alone, and take away anything that can help them to take their life, whether it's like razor blades or a gun or a knife, whatever it is, like bottles of pills. Like, make sure that they don't have access to anything that can help them take their life. Ask them if you can help them to seek help that they're comfortable with, and just offer that support as much as you can. And then if you also experience that with someone, then make sure you get help too, and be able to emotionally heal from what you experience as well, because that can, it affects you too when people
Yes.
are sharing you how they feel, and they're going through that stuff and you're there with them. So just make sure you're aware of how it's affecting you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, I think people also should look for, and you can tell me what you think about this, look for drastic changes in emotions. So if they are generally always a sad person, or they're going through a lot, and then one day they're super happy, be cautious of that, even, because a very sudden drastic change in emotion with no actual changes to circumstances could sometimes be a clue that a decision has been made, right? So it's a good time to check in. I was going, yeah, absolutely.
I did that when I was
Yes.
going through that, and I was down all the time. But funny, not everyone noticed it. Everyone kept on saying, I didn't know that you were going through anything. So it's weird. I thought it was obvious, but no one else knew. But when I knew I was going to go, I'm like, okay, I'm good now, because I'm not going to be here anymore.
I'm at peace. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you, can I ask how your suicide attempt, how did you survive it?
Yeah, so and I share this in the book as well, because I want to be as honest as possible for people to realize that they're not alone, and just share my journey. So I do share this in the book, how this all happened. I went home after school one day, and I was deciding between a gun and a bottle of aspirin, and I decided to put the gun away, and I decided to take the bottle of aspirin, because I thought that the gun, if I did that, that would be too messy. And now, either way, my mother and stepfather were still going to find me no matter what. So I don't know why I was like, oh, this would be better. But yeah, I decided to go with the bottle of aspirin. And when I was at that table in the kitchen taking each pill, and every time I took a pill, I'm like, I'm doing this because I'm feeling alone. I'm doing this because I'm excluded. I'm doing this because of the racism. I'm doing, like, I had a reason for every pill I took, because it was justifying why I was doing it. And after I did it, and after I took the whole bottle, and I was sitting there at the table, and I just started getting scared, and I started hearing, my internal voice, like, you don't have to do this, like, you don't have to have this be your end. And I ended up calling a friend who, earlier that day, a bunch of us were hanging out. We would always share poetry. And I shared a poem that day where someone who was a friend of a friend who didn't really know me, she interpreted as that poem meant suicide. And I was like, oh, no, 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 this, it's, doesn't have anything to do with that. It was about birds and a bird crashing down and stuff like that. And I was like, it's not about suicide. I didn't want to tell anyone, and so I called up my friend, and I was just like, your friend was right. She was like, what did you do? And I said, yeah, I didn't do something that was right. I didn't do something that was good. And she was like, what did you do? And I was like, I just took some aspirin, and now I'm scared. And she was like, okay, I'll be right there. So she came and got me, and we went to her house, and a few other friends were there, and they were trying to help me to vomit. Sorry, this is like
No,
too
it's
like
all, no,
graphic.
not at all. No, no.
So they
Life
were
is
trying to
messy.
help. Yeah, life is messy. So they were trying to help me to get everything out of my system, but I didn't eat that day, so I didn't have a
Have
way of getting it
anything.
out. So we went to a store, not a store, but like a fast food restaurant, because it was close by. And I was trying to eat, and I just started to feel really bad. Like, I was like, okay, I feel like I'm about to go. I was like, call poison control, because they'll know what to do. And they didn't know how to call poison control. So they went outside, and they called 911 instead.
Yeah.
And then they came back in, and they were looking at me, and I'm like, why are you looking at me like that? And they were like, yeah, we called 911. And then the ambulance came and I got in the ambulance, and the guy, the paramedic, he was not very nice to me. He was just like, why are you trying to take your life? And I said, I feel alone. And he's like, you got all these friends around you, yet you feel alone. And I didn't know or have the energy to explain to him that I can be around a lot of people, but I still feel alone even when I'm around a lot of people. And there's reasons I felt that way. But anyway, get to the hospital, and I also had some nurses that weren't nice to me either. Maybe it was their perception of people who try to take their life. I don't know if it was what it was, but they were not very nice to me. But one nurse was, and I was freezing. I was just shaking really bad, and I was like, "Can I get an extra blanket or something?" And she got me something, and I just from then on, the family came, and I ended up being okay. So yeah.
Good, good.
Yeah, I had to drink charcoal. I don't know if you've heard about that. Like,
Yeah. Ew. And it's amazing. Like, it's, I guess looking back, like, I mean, at the time it would have been extremely scary, but kind of looking back going, I can't believe we went to a fast food place to try and throw up. Like, why didn't we just call 911 to begin with? Right. But
I was hoping to not get to that place. I was like, let me get it out of my system. It'll be okay.
Yeah, but anything could have happened in that time, right?
That's true.
But what you talked about, the paramedics and the unkind nurses and doctors, I mean, that just highlights the importance of trauma-informed care, right? In all professions, it needs to be a thing. People are people. It doesn't matter if they're suicidal, it doesn't matter. They need to be treated like human beings and have dignity and understand that they're in a place of pain. I think when I had suicidal, I never attempted, but I had the thoughts and feelings, and I shared it with my doctor, and they said the best thing they could have ever said. And from then on, I was like, okay, it's okay to feel this way, because I'm not going to do it, but I can feel this way and not feel crazy. Because she said, Chrissy, I would be surprised if you didn't feel that way with all the things going on right now. Mm-hmm. This is so normal. You have a lot going on. I think you need to just go easy on yourself. You're not a failure for thinking those things. It would be unnatural for you not to think those things by this point, right? But we're going to get through, and we're going to make a promise right now that that's not the step we're going to take, right? And we did. We made that pact, and that was a decade ago. But I think just someone acknowledging, right, rather than shaming for something you're already ashamed about. I mean, how is that helpful? I don't know. Anyways,
right.
Thank you for sharing that. What is one more piece of advice that you can offer to shift a mindset to be more, constructive and positive, real positive?
There are so many things, but I feel like the one that I want to share right now, because I feel like I've been having so many talks about this with people, is the way we compare ourselves to others. Because we're all on our own journey, but when we are comparing ourselves to other people in order to determine or gauge if you're doing okay in your life or if you're succeeding, doing that, I feel like that is a way that isn't, I guess, healthy for your transformation. Because like I said before, we're all on our own journey. And so if you have to look at what someone else is doing in order to feel better about yourself, does that mean that they need to be doing bad for you to judge them in order for you to feel better? Or they need, or if they're doing really great, and then you feel like you're not doing enough, then you can't appreciate how far you've gone or what you're doing in your own journey and in your own life. So I think it's important for your own mental stability is just to be aware of where you're at in your journey instead of comparing yourself to anybody else. And then also being true to who you are. I want to mention that too, because sometimes I feel like we can change ourselves or alter our behavior or personality depending on who we're around in order to avoid being rejected or criticized or judged. And so much with like social media and with the media itself, like that can cause us to compare, and that can cause us to feel like, well, if I change this or if I do this, then I'll be lovable, or then I'll be more attractive, or whatever it is. So it's just about being able to see yourself and love what you see and love who you are, and being able to be true to that without being concerned with allowing other people to dictate your worth, and not looking at what's going on in other people's life in order to have that determine who you are or to validate yourself as well.
Absolutely. I love that. Those are very wise words. And how can people support themselves as they learn to not compare? What are the best things that they can do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I'm going to share what helps for me to not compare myself to other people, because it's so easy to compare yourself. And you're whether you're on social media or not, like I actually I'm not on social media that much because I know what it's done to my mental health. So I actually only get on it for certain reasons. So try to, if you know what affects your self-esteem or the way that you feel about yourself, about yourself, try to avoid engaging in that type of activity, so you don't keep on voluntarily putting yourself in that position to hurt yourself. So if you're around people who are constantly tearing you down, try not to be around those people. If you can avoid being around them, then do that, or let them know, depending on the relationship you have. If you can talk to them and be like, hey, I feel like you tear me down sometimes, let's talk about this, or whatever, like depending on the relationship, talk about it. But yeah, just be aware of your autonomy to make choices on being around the people who are good for you and supportive, or what you're watching on TV, or what you're looking at when you're looking at videos or streaming videos or whatever. And then just what helped me to get started on that, I had to look at myself in the mirror and actually tell myself that I love myself. Because for so long, I was living this life where I was like, please love me, not realizing that there were people in my life who did. I was just so, my perception of the way people felt about me was so skewed because I felt I didn't matter, that I didn't believe anyone did love me, even though there were ways that they were showing me that they did. So oddly enough, I was still having this mentality of please love me, not being able to see that some people did, instead of getting, and I wasn't able to, as I kept on saying please love me, I wasn't realizing that I needed to love myself. So I had to get to a place where how can I love myself? And so I had to look in the mirror. I mean, so many things you can do, but one thing that I did was I looked in the mirror and I actually told myself that I love you. Because that was not something I would say when I looked in the mirror. I was tearing myself down every time I looked in the mirror. I was always picking out whatever I thought was a flaw, or even if it was my personality, anything. I was literally looking at myself in the mirror and always saying horrible things to myself. Whether it was other things people told me, other judgments or criticisms that then became my thoughts, or whether it was just stuff that I developed because I felt excluded or, being marginalized, whatever. I allowed that, I internalized it, and then I felt that way about myself. And so I had to change that. And so I had to look at myself in the mirror, tell myself I love myself, and I had to consistently make choices that reflect that I valued myself. And then I know some people will be like, well, you can't just, say words to change your thoughts or to change your life, because we've been through so much and it just doesn't work like that. So part of it, of what I share with people, when you're affirming who you are, it's not about when you're trying to force yourself to believe those things about yourself. It's where you're reminding yourself of who you were before the world taught you otherwise. And you're also reminding yourself that you have a choice to define yourself. And so it's for you to believe it, so then you can actually then be influenced to carry out actions that are going to reflect that belief that you matter and that you value yourself.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That was a wonderful way to end the show. And where can people find you, Halima?
Well, you can go to hiyates.com. I feel like that would be an easy way. You can also get my book from there. You can choose which retailer you want to go through to get the book. But if you go to luvmrk.com as well, that's where I list the programs that I offer if you're interested in any type of coaching. And Luv Mrk is LUVMRK.com.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. We'll have it all in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me here. I enjoyed being here.
It was awesome.